Hi, this is Randy Hoexter with another piano lesson. Today we're going to talk about basic keyboard harmony, some stuff everybody needs to know in order to play chords on the piano. What we're going to talk about today is major triads, and we're going to talk about learning the major triads in all 12 keys in a specific pattern that I find to be particularly useful. Now, when you learn a major triad, you probably learn it by thinking of 1, 3, 5 like this. Nothing wrong with that. And then you might say, well, I can do that in all the keys by moving it up through half steps. And that's fine. The problem with this is that we tend to find the next chord by sliding up from the previous one. And so as you can see, I can slide my fingers up to the next note. So what you're really doing is navigating from one chord to the other rather than learning them on their own as specific items. Now, my suggestion is to learn the 12 major chords in a specific pattern called the cycle of fourths. Let's learn that. C being your first note for this example. 1, 2 and a half steps. 2 whole steps and a half steps higher brings us to F. 1, 2 whole steps and a half step higher. Next note, B flat. This will then continue E flat and so forth. Now, of course, dropping down a fifth is the same as going up a fourth. So A flat. And you will find all 12 notes will be covered in this pattern. Also, it makes it difficult for you to slide from one chord to the other in that same sort of tactile way. You'll have to find them by shape. And finally, this is the most common way that one chord moves to another. And sometimes in harmony we call this a strong root motion, from C to F, for example. Now, how do we learn to play these in this pattern? The next thing is that each major triad has 3 inversions. An inversion means which note is on the bottom of the chord. In this inversion, called the root position, the C, or the root, is on the bottom. When I remove the C and I put it up here, this is a first inversion, having the third on the bottom. It's in close position. The notes are as near as they can be to each other. Now, taking the E and putting it on top brings us to second inversion, which puts the fifth of the chord at the bottom. Same 3 notes, just different order. Finally, putting the G on top returns us to where we started. So there's really only 3 unique ways to play this chord. We want an exercise that, or a set of exercises that shows our hand where every one of these chords is and how to move from one to the other. Let's take a look at this pattern here of going through the cycle of fourths. C chord. Now, we learned our next chord is F. Now, if I put F here, this was an awkward picking up of the hand, which doesn't really, it's not what we would call a pianistic thing to play. It doesn't really reflect what the piano is good at, and it doesn't sound smooth. So instead, I'm going to play the C chord and find the nearest inversion of the F chord. Now, both chords have a C, so the nearest F chord is right here, second inversion of the F chord. Now that I've got this F chord, the B flat chord is next. They both have an F in the middle, first inversion. This illustrates the pattern with this cycle of forces, that a root chord leads to a second inversion chord, which leads to a first inversion chord. Now with this one, the first inversion chord going up a fourth leads to root again. So root, second, first, root, second, first. Eventually we end up where we started again, having played all 12 chords. However, we've only played each of them one way, so we're going to have to start this 3 different ways. Here's the C, root, second, first. And I end up on a C chord, root position again. I only played the C chord in root position in this pattern, so I need to play the C chord 2 other ways. Start with the C chord second inversion. I end up back where I started in second inversion on C. First inversion on C. Root, second. And back where I started. 3 different ways to play this progression, starting with all 3 inversions of the C chord. It's also important that we don't always start with the C chord. When you practice this, start with a different chord each time, or with each practice session, because it's a big circle and it really doesn't matter where you start, and we don't want to give C undue emphasis. It is helpful first to understand, but then really music should be in all different keys, and so we're ending up giving C an unnecessary bias. Start in a different key each day. Now, we can also reverse this pattern not as common, but it sounds good, which is to play the pattern going down by fourths or up by fifths. C leads to G now. Since the chord whole progression is backwards, now or in reverse, we're going to start with root, or we're going to start with rather root, first, second, root again. So it's root, first, second this time, because the whole thing, it's like running a movie in reverse. So here we'll go C, G, D, A, E. Right, and this one can be practiced 3 different ways, starting in 3 different inversions. C, G, D, A. This progression here, playing the cycle of fourths in reverse, also the cycle of fifths, is sometimes known as a retrogression or back cycling, and it can sound really good, and it also tends to have a kind of a nice rock and roll sound there. Now, so practicing these backwards and forwards, all 3 inversions of each chord as the beginning, makes 6 different exercises. We're going to practice this, hopefully, until our hands can find it without really thinking, because this is the kind of muscle memory that will make your playing effortless. So I hope this helps you. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.